My daughter-in-law said that my food was inedible. So, I smiled and sold the apartment they lived in for free. Don't forget to subscribe and comment below where in the world you're watching from. And what time is it for you? Let's see how far this story travels. For 35 years, I'd been the supportive wife, the doting mother, the perfect hostess. Then came the night when my daughter-in-law looked me in the eyes and said, "Honestly, Eleanor, how does anyone manage to eat something this inedible? I don't know how Andrew survived his childhood." Clara's words sliced through the dining room of our Boston home. The table fell silent as all eyes turned to me. I stood frozen, still holding the roast I'd spent all day preparing. Robert, my husband of 35 years, sighed and continued eating, eyes fixed on his plate. Andrew, our 32-year-old son, shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. The silence stretched like a rubber band, ready to snap. I blinked back tears and forced a tight smile. "Perhaps you'd prefer takeout next time," I managed, barely above a whisper. "Excellent idea," Clara replied, exchanging a look with Andrew. "Then nobody has to pretend they enjoy your cooking." Robert cleared his throat and changed the subject, completely ignoring what had just happened. Just another day in the Thompson household. As I served dessert, my eyes drifted to the framed photos on our dining room wall. One showed a younger version of myself at the Boston College of Art, where I'd studied before dropping out to marry Robert. My professors had once called me promising. I hadn't picked up a paintbrush in 30 years. My gaze lingered on another frame, the deed to a downtown Boston apartment, a birthday gift from my father that I'd kept in my name, even after marriage. The same apartment where Andrew and Clara had been living rent-free for 3 years. Later that night, after everyone left, I stood in the kitchen scrubbing dishes with unnecessary force. My reflection in the window caught my attention, a stranger with hollow eyes and slumped shoulders. When had I disappeared? When had I become this ghost who existed only to serve others? The phone rang. "Andrew." "Mom?" "Clara and I were wondering if we could borrow your credit card for a furniture purchase. We'll pay you back next month." Just like the loans they'd been promising to repay for years. Just like the temporary living arrangement in my apartment that had stretched to 3 years. Something inside me snapped. "No," I said, the word feeling foreign. "What?" Andrew sounded shocked. I said, "No, Andrew." My voice was steadier now. Silence, then anger. "Is this because of what Clara said?" She was just being honest. "You've always been too sensitive." I hung up without another word. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. For the first time in decades, I felt something else stirring within me, something that felt dangerously like power. As I turned off the kitchen light, I found myself looking once more at the framed deed. My apartment. My property. Mine. I picked up my phone and scrolled through contacts until I found attorney David Miller, attorney at law. The morning after Clara's dinner comment found me sitting at our kitchen island, staring into coffee as Robert moved around the kitchen. "You bought the wrong brand of coffee again," he remarked without looking up. "The store was out of your usual. Just pay more attention next time." Is that so difficult? These small cruelties had become the soundtrack of our marriage. His exasperated sighs when I spoke, his eyes on his screen during conversations, his constant corrections. Somewhere along the way, I'd started believing I deserved them. After Robert left, I sat in the silence of our empty house. My phone buzzed with a text from David Miller confirming our appointment. I hadn't slept, questioning my sudden boldness. Now, doubt crept back in. Was I overreacting? Was it worth upending everything over hurt feelings? But it wasn't just one comment. It was years of slow erosion, of becoming invisible in my own life. That afternoon, I dropped by Andrew and Clara's place unannounced. I still had a key, though I always called before visiting, a courtesy they never extended to me. The apartment was empty when I arrived. Standing in their living room, I was struck by how different it looked from when I'd inherited it. Clara had redecorated completely. Nothing of me remained. On their coffee table, I noticed several unopened bills marked "Final Notice," credit card debt, substantial credit card debt. As I looked closer, I found more. Missed payments on Andrew's new car, an expensive watch purchased on installment. I was about to leave when I heard keys in the door. Andrew stopped short when he saw me. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "I was in the neighborhood," I gestured toward the bills. Is everything okay financially? His face hardened. We're handling it. Not everything is your business. It might be my business if you're struggling while living in my apartment. His eyes narrowed. So, that's what this is about? You're checking up on us because Clara hurt your feelings? God, Mom, grow up. The casual cruelty stunned me. This wasn't my sweet boy. This was a stranger wearing his face. I raised you better than this, I whispered. You raised me to be a pushover, just like you, he snapped. Thankfully, Clara helped me see that. I left without another word, my heart breaking. On the drive home, I passed the Boston College of Art campus. On impulse, I pulled into the visitor parking lot and watched students crossing the quad with portfolios and easels, young people with dreams still intact, people who hadn't surrendered their passions to become what others needed them to be. When I started the car again, my decision was made. Tomorrow's meeting with David Miller wouldn't be about hypotheticals. It would be about reclaiming my life, starting with that apartment. Because Andrew had been right about one thing, Clara had helped him see something clearly. And now she had inadvertently done the same for me. 2 weeks after the dinner incident, I threw Andrew a surprise birthday party. Despite everything, he was still my son, and I hoped a generous gesture might help repair our relationship. I spent days preparing, decorating, cooking his favorite foods, purchasing an expensive watch he'd been eyeing. Robert promised to be there but canceled last minute. When Andrew and Clara arrived, the initial surprise seemed successful. Andrew appeared touched. Clara smiled and complimented my decorations loudly. Midway through the party, I slipped into the kitchen to check on the cake and heard Clara's voice around the corner. I don't know how you manage these weekly visits, said her friend Allison. It's the price we pay for the free apartment. Clara laughed. Besides, Eleanor is so desperate for approval, it's easy to manipulate her. Did you see the gift? Exactly what I suggested, and she has no idea she's being used. I froze, hand gripping the doorframe. For the rest of the evening, I moved through the party in a daze. When Clara made another cutting remark about my cooking, something in me finally snapped. If you don't like my food, perhaps you should cook in your own home, I said quietly. Clara immediately amplified the moment. Eleanor, I'm shocked at your hostility. Andrew, is your mother all right? She seems unstable. Andrew pulled me aside. Mom, what's going on? You're making everyone uncomfortable. Clara was just joking about the food. I looked at my son and saw a stranger. When had he become this person who would side with someone mocking his mother? The party ended early. After everyone left, I sat alone in my kitchen, surrounded by dirty dishes and leftover food. My phone buzzed with a text from Andrew. We need to talk about your behavior tonight. Clara is really upset. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and navigated to the property management website for my downtown apartment, the place where Andrew and Clara lived rent-free while they drove new cars and wore expensive watches. The next morning, I received another text. Mom, Clara and I are concerned about you. Have you considered talking to someone? These mood swings aren't normal. Mood swings? One assertive comment after years of compliance was hardly a mood swing. I called my friend Beth, the only person I still felt I could trust. Beth, does it seem like I've been having mood swings? After an uncomfortable pause, she answered, Eleanor, I need to tell you something. Clara has been calling people. What things? She's saying concerning things about you. What kind of things? That you're showing signs of early dementia? That you're becoming unstable and aggressive? Beth hesitated. And she's implying you might be having an affair with George from across the street. George, the widower whose garden I occasionally helped with since his wife Margaret died. The notion was absurd. She's shown people texts, supposedly, between you and George, Beth continued. And she has photos of you talking in the garden that she's edited to look intimate. As Beth spoke, pieces fell into place. Andrew's concern about mood swings, the whispers that stopped when I entered rooms. Clara wasn't just insulting me at dinner tables. She was systematically destroying my reputation. When I hung up, I noticed my hands weren't shaking anymore. In their place was a cold resolve I'd never felt before. I picked up my phone and dialed attorney David Miller. David, I need to move forward with selling the apartment. Immediately. In the days following Beth's revelation, I noticed changes in how people treated me. Phone calls went unreturned. My weekly lunch with Jane, a friend of 20 years, was cancelled. Even my sister seemed distant on the phone. The explanation came when Beth appeared at my door. "I need to tell you something else, Eleanor. It's worse than I thought." Over tea, Beth revealed the full extent of Clara's campaign against me. Not only was Clara telling people I was showing signs of dementia, but she was fabricating evidence of an affair between me and George. "She's shown several people supposed text messages between you and George," Beth explained. "And she has photos of you talking in his garden that she's edited to look compromising." Edited photos? Fake texts? That's criminal. "She's using her legal background effectively," Beth said grimly, "creating just enough evidence to make people doubt without crossing into obvious defamation." That evening, I confronted Robert about the rumors. His reaction told me everything. "This wouldn't be the first time questions have been raised about your fidelity, Eleanor," he said, voice tight with anger. "And you have been spending time with Mr. Davis lately." "I help with his garden since Margaret died," I protested. "Just like you helped your friend from that painting class 7 years ago?" Robert shot back. "Messages at 11 p.m. weren't about watercolor techniques, were they?" The accusations struck me like a physical blow. The painting class, my one attempt to reconnect with my abandoned passion, had ended with Robert's unfounded jealousy, forcing me to quit. I tried calling Andrew that night, but he didn't answer. When he finally returned my call the next day, his voice was cold. "Clara showed me everything, Mom. The messages, the photos. I think you need professional help." The rumors spread like wildfire. At the supermarket, I overheard women whispering, "That's Eleanor Thompson, the one having an affair with the widower next door." My life was collapsing. Robert moved out the following week. Divorce papers arrived shortly after. In the midst of this nightmare, George Davis appeared on my doorstep. "Eleanor, people in the neighborhood are saying things about us." I invited him in, aware of curtains twitching across the street as neighbors observed this interaction. "I know," I said once we were inside. "My daughter-in-law is spreading rumors." "But why?" he asked, genuinely confused. "Control," I said finally, "and my apartment downtown." George nodded slowly. "Margaret always said you should never underestimate someone who stands to benefit from your downfall." He reached across and briefly squeezed my hand. "Whatever you need, I'm in your corner." As he left, I noticed Mrs. Peterson photographing us from her window. Within hours, I received a text from Andrew. "This is exactly what we're talking about. Do you have no shame?" That night, I spread all my financial documents across the dining table. Credit card statements showing loans to Andrew that were never repaid, property tax bills for the apartment, the deed still solely in my name. I'd spent my entire adult life being the perfect wife, the supportive mother, the accommodating friend, and my reward was being painted as unstable, unfaithful, untrustworthy. As dawn broke, I made 2 calls, the first to Lisa White, Boston's most ruthless real estate agent. The second to attorney Sarah Chen, a criminal attorney specializing in defamation and digital evidence tampering. It was time to change more than just the locks. 3 months passed. Divorce proceedings were underway. I existed in suffocating isolation. Robert lived near his office now. Andrew wouldn't take my calls. The social isolation cut almost as deeply as the divorce. My reputation lay in ruins. At the garden club I'd belonged to for 15 years, conversations stopped when I approached. My hairdresser of a decade was suddenly booked solid whenever I called. "Eleanor's going through something." I overheard a woman whisper at the coffee shop. Robert found messages on her phone with the widower next door. Each outing became an ordeal. I started ordering groceries online. I switched churches. Gradually, my world contracted to the walls of my house, now too large and painfully quiet. Through Beth, I learned that Clara continued fueling the narrative of the unstable mother-in-law, now adding that I had tried to sabotage Andrew's marriage out of jealousy. Attorney Sarah Chen, the attorney I'd hired to investigate Clara's defamation, called with an update. "Mrs. Thompson, we've confirmed the text messages were fabricated. The metadata doesn't match genuine communications, and the photo alterations are detectable. This is criminal evidence tampering. What do you recommend?" "We have grounds for a serious case against her. Given her position as an attorney, this could end her career." I considered the implications. Pursuing legal action would publicly vindicate me. but it would destroy my relationship with Andrew. Despite everything, he was still my son. Let's hold off for now, I decided. Keep collecting evidence, but don't file anything yet. In a desperate attempt to reconnect, I showed up unannounced at Andrew and Clara's apartment one evening. I found Clara entertaining guests at a dinner party. The panic on her face quickly transformed into a condescending smile. "Eleanor, what a surprise. You should have called first." Hatton alerted her guests. She whispered to those nearby, "My former mother-in-law. The divorce has been hard on her." She raised her voice slightly. "Andrew isn't here. He had to work late." The humiliation was complete when one guest suggested calling me an Uber, as if I were incapable of managing alone. As I left, I noticed a document on the side table, a property valuation form for my downtown apartment. That night, staring at my bedroom ceiling, I finally understood that I couldn't remain the victim in this story. The apartment where my son and daughter-in-law lived rent-free. My apartment might be my only way to regain control of my life. I've made an appointment with the neurologist. I told Beth over coffee the next morning. "Eleanor, you don't have dementia. Don't let them make you question your own mind." "I know," I replied calmly. "That's exactly why I'm going. I need documentation of my cognitive health for what comes next." Attorney David Miller had advised this step. "If they're painting you as mentally unstable, we need to get ahead of it," he'd explained. "Medical documentation will be crucial if they try to contest your right to sell the property." The neurologist, Dr. Emily Carter, was thorough and kind. After testing, she confirmed, "Mrs. Thompson, your cognitive function is excellent. There's absolutely no evidence of dementia or any impairment." Armed with this documentation, I moved forward with my plan. Lisa White confirmed what I suspected. Boston's housing market was booming, and my apartment's prime location made it extremely valuable. "We should list it immediately," she advised. "Properties like this don't stay on the market long." The morning after my call with Robert, I sat with attorney David Miller in his downtown law office. "I'm worried about you, Eleanor," he said, noting my hollow cheeks and weight loss. "Is Robert being fair in the negotiations?" I sighed. "As fair as possible, considering he believes I cheated on him." I explained the entire situation: Clara's fabricated evidence, Andrew's betrayal, and the property valuation form I'd seen. David Miller frowned. "You think they're planning to buy the apartment from you?" "Number. I think they're planning to convince Robert. I'm incapable of managing my finances, so he can take control during the divorce. The apartment would be part of the settlement." After reviewing my documentation, David Miller confirmed that the apartment remained solely in my name. "They can't touch it without your permission," he assured me. For the first time in months, I felt a spark of power. "And if I wanted to sell, it's your right. The current occupants would need legal notification, but being your property, you have complete autonomy over it." On my way home, I passed by the apartment building and gazed at its elegant facade. I hesitated, thinking of Andrew. Despite everything, he was my son. Selling the apartment would sever one of the last connections between us. But then I remembered the unanswered messages, the ignored calls, how he stood beside Clara while my reputation was destroyed by lies. My son had chosen his side, and it wasn't mine. That evening, I made my decision. Tomorrow, I would call a real estate agent. The next morning, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find George Davis on my doorstep. "Eleanor, I thought you should know. Clara came to see me yesterday." "What did she want?" "She asked if I would be willing to testify about our relationship," he said, making air quotes. "She implied it would be better for me if I cooperated with their narrative." "Blackmail?" I asked, feeling sick. Not explicitly, but the implication was clear. He hesitated. "Eleanor, I told her I'd be happy to testify about how you've been a kind neighbor who occasionally helps with my garden. Nothing more. I also mentioned that my security cameras have recorded every interaction we've had in my yard." I felt a surge of gratitude. "You have security cameras?" "Installed after Margaret's jewelry went missing last year," he explained. "The cameras show nothing but neighborly conversations between us." I offered to provide the footage to Clara. She left rather abruptly after that. For the first time in months, I laughed a genuine laugh that felt foreign in my throat. After George left, I called Lisa White and scheduled our first meeting. Then I called Dr. Emily Carter's office and requested additional copies of my neurological evaluation. Finally, I contacted my bank and began moving my accounts to a new institution where neither Robert nor Andrew had any connections. That night, I pulled out a box from the back of my closet. My old art supplies, untouched for decades. The brushes were stiff, the paints dried out, but holding them felt like reconnecting with a long-lost friend. I ordered new supplies online and set up a small easel in what had been Robert's study. As I cleared his remaining possessions from the desk, I found an old photograph tucked in a book, Robert and me on our honeymoon in Rome. I studied the young woman in the photo, bright-eyed, confident, full of dreams. Where had she gone? As I placed the photo back, I made another promise to myself. When this was all over, I would go to Italy, not as Robert's wife or Andrew's mother, but as Eleanor Thompson, artist, traveler, woman, reclaiming her life. I didn't act impulsively. With methodical calm, I developed a careful plan. First, I hired Lisa White, a respected realtor specializing in luxury Boston properties. I want absolute discretion, I instructed her. The current occupants shouldn't know the property is for sale until absolutely necessary. Lisa agreed. We'll only schedule viewings when we have serious, pre-approved buyers. She evaluated the apartment at a value significantly higher than I expected. Boston's real estate market was hot, and the location was premium. Following David Miller's advice, I took measures to document my mental capacity and financial decisions. I consulted a therapist and the neurologist, obtaining reports confirming my cognitive abilities. I also compiled a detailed history of all communications ignored by Andrew and Clara, along with evidence of the rumors Clara spread. Meanwhile, I began reorganizing my life. I updated all passwords. I reviewed my will and removed Andrew as primary beneficiary, establishing that he'd only receive his inheritance if he completed a financial counseling program. I transferred funds to a new account at a different bank. During this period, the divorce proceedings advanced. Robert, convinced of my infidelity, was surprisingly generous-driven, I suspect, by guilt for so readily believing the lies about me. I accepted the settlement, knowing the apartment sale would provide the financial independence I'd need. Beth, my loyal friend, noticed the change in my demeanor during our weekly coffee. "You seem different," she commented, studying me over her cup. "I feel different," I replied. Behind my pain, there was a growing resolution. For the first time in decades, I was making decisions for myself, not to please Robert or Andrew. 2 weeks later, Lisa called with news. "I have a very interested couple. He's a surgeon at City General. She's a university professor. They're willing to make an offer above asking price if they can see the property this week." I took a deep breath. "Schedule the viewing, Lisa. It's time to turn the tables." The day of the viewing arrived a Wednesday, when Clara normally worked late at her law firm. I'd deliberately chosen this time, wanting to avoid confrontation. Lisa would show the property while Andrew and Clara were out, but fate had other plans. A court case was unexpectedly canceled, and Clara returned to the apartment earlier than usual. I was sitting in my car around the corner, having insisted on being nearby, just in case. My phone rang. It was Lisa. "Mrs. Thompson, we have a situation." Mrs. Porter arrived home during the viewing. My heart raced. "What happened?" She was upset. "The Chens left quickly, but they're still interested. However, Mrs. Porter is now calling your son. I thought you should know." As if on cue, my phone beeped with an incoming call. Andrew. I declined it, watching the screen light up again immediately. After the 5th call in 3 minutes, I finally answered. "What the hell are you doing?" Andrew's voice was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "Selling my property?" I replied, surprised by my own calmness. "We live there. That's our home. It's a property I've generously allowed you to use rent-free for 3 years," I responded. "Given how you've treated me recently, I've decided it's time to end that arrangement. You have 60 days to find other accommodations." "You can't do this," Andrew's voice broke. "We can't afford anything else in this area." "You should have thought about that before allowing your wife to destroy my reputation and my marriage," I said, my voice steady despite my trembling hands. "Actions have consequences, Andrew. Mom, please, we'll pay rent, whatever you want." The desperation in his voice momentarily shook my resolve. This was my son, my only child. It's too late for that, I said finally. The Chens have made an excellent offer. I'm accepting it. When I hung up, tears streamed down my face. This wasn't how I wanted things to be. I never wanted to hurt my son. But as I wiped my cheeks and started the car, I realized something important. For too long, I'd prioritized Andrew's feelings over my own well-being. Not anymore. Over the next 4 weeks, the sale process moved forward with surprising efficiency. The Chens, eager to secure the property before the fall academic term, expedited their financing and paperwork. Lisa managed the transaction expertly, while David Miller ensured all legal requirements were meticulously followed. Clara and Andrew's attempts to delay the sale proved futile. Their attorney sent a letter claiming verbal promises of long-term residence, which David Miller quickly dismissed by producing the original correspondence from 3 years ago, clearly labeling the arrangement as temporary. Through Beth, I learned that Clara and Andrew were struggling to find affordable housing in Boston's expensive market. Their financial situation, apparently precarious despite outward appearances, limited their options. They're telling everyone they're choosing to move to Medford for more space, Beth reported during our weekly coffee, but nobody's buying it. Throughout this period, I received increasingly desperate communications from both Andrew and Clara. Their messages evolved from angry accusations, "How could you do this to your own son?" to bargaining, "We'll pay market rate rent," to outright pleading, "We have nowhere to go." I maintained a position of calm detachment, responding only with factual information about moving timelines and legal requirements. 3 days before the scheduled closing, I received an unexpected visitor. Clara herself, standing on my doorstep, looking nothing like the polished, confident woman who had called my cooking inedible months earlier. "We need to talk," she said, her voice missing its usual edge. I allowed her inside, but remained standing, unwilling to settle into a comfortable conversation. "What about?" "This has gone far enough, Eleanor," she said, attempting to reclaim her authoritative tone. "You've made your point. You're hurting Andrew to get back at me, and it's not fair." "I'm selling my property," I replied calmly, "something I have every right to do. Look, I'm sorry about what happened at dinner that night. I was out of line, but this response is completely disproportionate." The audacity of her statement nearly took my breath away. "This isn't about one dinner comment, Clara. It's about the systematic campaign you launched to destroy my reputation and my marriage. It's about the lies you told my son, my friends, and my community." She had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable before recovering. "Those were misunderstandings. I have copies of the edited photos," I interrupted, "and statements from people you approached with fabricated text messages. George Davis has security camera footage of every interaction we've had in his garden. Attorney Sarah Chen, my attorney, has confirmed the texts were fabricated through metadata analysis." "Would you like me to continue?" The color drained from her face. "You wouldn't dare take legal action." "I absolutely would. Fabricating evidence is a serious offense, Clara, for anyone, but especially for an attorney. The Bar Association takes a particularly dim view of such ethics violations." She stared at me, speechless for perhaps the first time since I'd known her. "I don't expect an apology," I continued. "I don't even want one from you. What I want is for this transaction to conclude smoothly, for you and Andrew to vacate my property by the agreed date, and for us never to have this conversation again." "Eleanor, please," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Andrew doesn't deserve this. He loves that apartment. Andrew made his choice when he believed your lies over a lifetime of trust with me," I replied, surprised by my own steadiness. "He chose you, Clara. Now he gets to live with that choice, just not in my apartment." After she left, I felt a quiet sadness for what had been lost. Not just the relationship with my son, but the woman I'd been for so many years. The woman who would have forgiven anything to keep peace, who would have sacrificed her own dignity to maintain family harmony. That evening, I began preparations for my trip to Italy, scheduled to begin the day after closing. The timing was deliberate. I wanted to be far away when Andrew and Clara finally moved out, unable to be reached for last-minute appeals or guilt trips. The sale of the apartment concluded with remarkable efficiency. The Chen's cash offer eliminated typical financing delays, and within 6 weeks of accepting their offer, all documents were signed and the closing date was set. What normally would have taken 3 to 4 months was accomplished in half that time. On the morning of the closing, I sat in David Miller's office, signing the final paperwork. A strange mixture of emotions washed over me: relief, sadness, triumph, loss. The apartment had represented so many things: my father's faith in me, my independence within marriage, and finally, the leverage I needed to reclaim my life. "Congratulations, Eleanor," David Miller said as I signed the last document. "What's next for you?" "Italy," I replied, a small smile forming. "Florence, Rome, Tuscany, all the art I studied in college but never saw in person." He nodded approvingly. "I've always believed traveling alone is one of life's great pleasures." "When do you leave?" "Tomorrow morning. First class." The extravagance was unlike me. But then again, the woman purchasing that ticket wasn't the same person who had endured Clara's insult at the dinner table 6 months ago. As I left David Miller's office, my phone buzzed with a message from Beth. "Andrew was just here asking for your new address. Told him I didn't have it. Call me." I found a quiet cafe and called her back immediately. "He seemed desperate," Beth explained. "Said Clara moved some of her things out last night to Mr. Stone's place. Apparently, they've been seeing each other for months." The revelation didn't surprise me. Clara had always been strategic, and a senior partner at her law firm represented a significant upgrade from my school teacher's son. "How did Andrew seem?" I asked, concerned despite everything. "Shocked, hurt. He mentioned finding messages on her phone a few weeks ago but didn't want to believe it." So there it was, the complete unraveling of the life Andrew had chosen over loyalty to me. While I took no pleasure in his pain, there was a certain symmetry to it. He had chosen to believe Clara's lies about me. Now he was forced to confront her lies to him. That evening, as I finished packing for Italy, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Andrew standing there, looking like he hadn't slept in days. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice ragged. I stepped aside silently, allowing him into the house where he'd grown up. We sat in the kitchen, the heart of our family home, now feeling like neutral territory. "Clara's been having an affair," he said without preamble. "With Mr. Stone, her boss." I nodded. "I'm sorry to hear that. Did you know?" "I suspected," I replied honestly. "She's always been ambitious." He stared at his hands. "I found messages on her phone weeks ago, but I convinced myself I was misinterpreting them." He looked up, his eyes red, rimmed. "I did to myself exactly what I did to you. I chose to believe what was convenient rather than what was true." The admission hung in the air between us. I offered nothing, no absolution, no, "I told you so." Some realizations need to be fully felt without the cushion of forgiveness. "I should have trusted you," he continued. "After all those years, after everything you've done for me, how could I have believed her over you? That's a question you need to answer for yourself, Andrew." He nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about it constantly, I think. I wanted to believe I deserved the life she was offering, the connections, the status, the admiration of her circle. It was easier to see you as the problem than to question whether I had earned any of it." "Thank you for saying that," I said finally. "Where do we go from here?" he asked, vulnerability raw in his voice. I looked at my son, really looked at him, the boy I'd raised, the man he'd become, the person he might yet grow into through this painful lesson. "I don't know, Andrew. That's not something I can decide tonight." As he stood to leave, he noticed the suitcase by the door. "You're going somewhere?" "Italy. For a month. I leave tomorrow." "Italy," he repeated, a flash of recognition crossing his face. "Like you always wanted to when I was growing up." The fact that he remembered those long-ago conversations, dreams I'd set aside for family obligations, touched something in me. "Yes," I said softly, "exactly like that." The month in Italy transformed me in ways I hadn't anticipated. I'd expected to enjoy the art, the architecture, the food, and I did, immensely. What I hadn't expected was how the distance would clarify my perspective on the events of the past year. In Florence, standing before Botticelli's masterpieces, I felt something awakening within me, a passion dormant for decades. I purchased watercolors and began sketching the Tuscan landscapes, sitting for hours in sun-drenched piazzas. My initial attempts were awkward and amateurish, but each day brought small improvements as muscle memory from my college days gradually returned. While I immersed myself in art and culture, life in Boston continued. Through occasional emails with Beth, I learned that Andrew and Clara's divorce was proceeding rapidly. The spectacular sale of their apartment had forced them to downsize significantly in Andrew to a small place in Medford, Clara, to her new boyfriend, Mr. Stone's luxury condo. The irony isn't lost on anyone, Beth wrote. Clara's careful social climbing culminated in her dating the man she's worked for all these years. People talk about little else at the garden club. I found myself caring less about the gossip than I would have expected. From 3,000 miles away, the social ecosystem that had once defined my worth seemed remarkably insignificant compared to the vibrant world I was exploring. In the third week of my trip, I received an unexpected email from Robert. He'd gotten my address from Beth, who'd apparently decided he deserved a chance to communicate. "Eleanor," he wrote, "I owe you an apology. Andrew has told me everything about Clara's deceptions. I should have trusted you after 35 years together. The evidence seemed so convincing, but that's no excuse. I should have given you the benefit of the doubt. I've been doing a lot of thinking about our marriage and how I treated you. Even before all this happened, I wasn't the husband you deserved. I'm sorry for that, too." The apology, arriving after months of painful isolation, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Not because I wanted Robert back, that chapter was firmly closed, but because the validation meant something after being branded a liar and a cheat. I responded with simple gratitude for his words and wished him well, making it clear that while I accepted his apology, reconciliation wasn't on the table. Some broken things stay broken, and our marriage was one of them. On my last day in Florence, I visited a small gallery near my hotel. The owner, an elegant Italian woman named Sophia, noticed me sketching in a nearby cafe and invited me in to see her collection. As we conversed in my rusty college Italian, she asked to see my sketches. "These have feeling," she said, flipping through my amateur watercolors. "Not perfect technique, no, but authentic emotion. This is what cannot be taught." Her kindness encouraged me, but I laughed off the implicit compliment. "I'm just a tourist playing at being an artist." Sophia shook her head firmly. "No, you are an artist who has been absent from your true self. There is a difference." When I returned to Boston in early autumn, the city seemed different, not because it had changed, but because I had. I moved through my days with a new sense of purpose, setting up a proper art studio in what had been Robert's study. I enrolled in an adult education painting class at the community college, humbly taking my place among other beginners, despite being the oldest student by at least 20 years. My instructor, Mr. Harrison, a kind-eyed man in his 40s, took special interest in my work. "You have an unusual perspective," he told me after class one evening. "Most beginners focus on getting the technique right, but your work already has a distinct voice. Where did you study before?" "Boston College of Art. But I dropped out 40 years ago to get married." Something in my tone must have revealed more than my words, because he nodded with understanding. "Art has a way of waiting for us to come back to it. The time away isn't wasted. It becomes part of what you bring to the canvas." The months that followed brought profound changes. Clara's carefully constructed facade crumbled spectacularly. Her relationship with Mr. Stone lasted barely 3 months before he traded her in for an even younger associate. The professional community that had once admired her now whispered about her ethical lapses somehow. Rumors of her evidence tampering had circulated through Boston's legal circles, though I never pursued formal charges. Andrew's divorce finalized quickly. Without the apartment or Clara's income, he was forced to economize drastically. He took a second job tutoring evening classes and moved to an even smaller apartment further from the city center. The struggle seemed to change him, stripping away layers of entitlement and forcing him to confront his own complicity in what had happened. Our reconciliation progressed slowly, with careful steps from both sides. We began with occasional phone calls, then coffee meetings in neutral locations. The conversations were initially awkward, punctuated by long silences and careful avoidance of painful topics. Gradually, honesty began to emerge. I was so desperate to please Clara that I couldn't see what was happening, Andrew confessed during one of our meetings. "It was easier to believe you were having problems than to admit she was manipulating me." I made my own difficult admissions. I enabled your dependency. I was too submissive, too afraid of losing your affection to establish healthy boundaries. I never required you to be accountable. Each conversation peeled back another layer of hurt, revealing the tangled roots of our broken relationship. There were setbacks, times when old patterns threatened to re-emerge, when Andrew expected accommodations I was no longer willing to make, when I caught myself falling into the familiar role of self-sacrificing mother. But each time, we recognized the pattern and adjusted, learning to relate as adults rather than through our old dynamics. Meanwhile, my artistic journey continued. The community college classes had given me a foundation to rebuild my technical skills, but I found myself increasingly drawn to more experimental approaches. I enrolled in a more advanced workshop at the Boston Art Museum, where I was the oldest student by decades, but quickly became known for my emotionally evocative watercolors. My instructor, Miss Lopez, took particular interest in my development. Your life experience gives your work a depth that my younger students can't access, she told me after critiquing a particularly raw piece I'd created about the dinner that had changed everything. You've lived enough to understand that beauty and pain are often inseparable. As winter settled over Boston, I received exciting news. Lisa White's friend, gallery owner Maria Rossi, who owned a small gallery on Newbury Street, was putting together a show of late bloomers artists who found or returned to their craft after 50. Lisa had mentioned my story and my watercolors, and Maria was interested in including me. I nearly dropped the phone. My watercolors? But I'm just a beginner again. They're not gallery quality. Maria disagrees. She saw those small pieces you had in your hallway when we were preparing your house for viewings. She said they have authentic, emotional resonance. The phrase so closely echoed Sophia's words in Florence that it made me pause. I'd need to create new work, better work. You have 4 months, Lisa said cheerfully. The show opens in February. During this period, Robert reached out again. We met for coffee, our first face-to-face meeting since the divorce finalized. He seemed different, older, humbler, more thoughtful. You look well, Eleanor, he said, studying me across the table. There's something different about you. There is, I agreed simply. He nodded, understanding more than I'd explicitly stated. I've been seeing a therapist, he admitted, trying to understand why I was so quick to believe the worst about you after 35 years. And what have you discovered? I asked, genuinely curious. That I've always been afraid you'd outgrow me. The vulnerability in his admission surprised me. When we met, you were this talented, creative force, full of potential and passion. I think part of me always feared that if you fully developed those gifts, you'd realize you didn't need me. The insight struck uncomfortably close to truth. So you preferred me smaller, more dependent? Not consciously, he sighed, but essentially yes. It's not something I'm proud of. As our conversation continued, Robert mentioned he'd heard about my upcoming gallery show. I'd like to attend, if that wouldn't make you uncomfortable. I considered his request. As long as you understand it's not an opening for reconciliation, that chapter is closed, Robert. I understand, he said quietly. I just want to see what you've created, to support this new phase of your life, even if I'm no longer part of it. Walking home from our meeting, I felt a strange sense of completion. The anger and hurt that had consumed me for months had transformed into something else. Not forgiveness exactly, but a kind of peaceful detachment. Robert was part of my past, not my future. And that was exactly as it should be. 2 years after that fateful dinner where Clara called my food inedible, I'm barely recognizable now in appearance, but in presence and confidence. At 60, I've discovered a version of myself I never knew existed. My painting studio, once Robert's office, has become my sanctuary. Following my successful first exhibition, my work has gained modest but growing recognition in Boston's art community. I'm preparing for my upcoming solo show, balancing time between creating new pieces and teaching a watercolor class for beginners at the community center, finding joy in helping others discover their creative voices, particularly those who, like me, set aside artistic dreams for family obligations. Andrew, now divorced and living a simpler life, has evolved into someone I genuinely enjoy knowing, not just as my son, but as a thoughtful adult. Our weekly dinners have become a pleasant ritual rather than an obligation. He's begun dating again a kindergarten teacher named Grace, who seems refreshingly genuine and kind. On a crisp autumn morning, my mail includes a thick cream envelope, an invitation to Clara and Mr. Stone's wedding. I laugh at the irony and the transparent attempt to remind me of her success despite everything. The same day, Robert calls, asking if we might have dinner. "There's something important I'd like to discuss," he says, and I understand he's still hoping for reconciliation. Sitting in my garden with tea, I contemplate these two communications, both representing paths back to my past. Clara's invitation, a reminder of humiliation suffered. Robert's call, an opportunity to return to the familiar security of my former role as wife. When Andrew arrives for our weekly dinner, he notices the wedding invitation on the counter and mentions that he received one too. "Are you going?" he asks. I smile, a serene expression reflecting my inner peace. "I think not. Some connections are better left in the past. And Dad, he mentioned he was going to call you. Some chapters, once closed, should remain that way," I reply gently. After Andrew leaves, I prepare the same roast that Clara had called inedible 2 years before. This time, I cook it just for myself, savoring each bite while reviewing plans for my next adventure, a painting retreat on Spain's Costa Brava, where I've been invited as a guest instructor. Looking out my window at Boston's lights, I finally understand that true revenge wasn't selling the apartment or watching Andrew and Clara's marriage collapse. It was rediscovering myself, establishing healthy boundaries, and learning to prioritize my own happiness. My phone rings. It's Maria Rossi from the gallery with exciting news. A museum curator saw my work and wants to include 2 pieces in an upcoming exhibition of New England artists. As we discuss details, I find myself agreeing to commitments that will shape the next year of my life, defined by my choices alone. After we hang up, I pour a glass of wine and toast my reflection in the window. "To you, Eleanor," I whisper, "the woman you were always meant to be." Outside, snow begins to fall, the first of the season. I grab my sketchbook, eager to capture the transformation of the familiar landscape into something new and beautiful, just like me. The doorbell rings unexpectedly. When I open it, I find Beth standing there with a bottle of champagne, followed by George carrying a small cake. "We heard about the museum exhibition," Beth says, grinning. "This calls for a celebration." As we sit in my kitchen, glasses raised in toast, George asks the question I've been pondering myself. "Did you ever imagine your life could change so completely at our age?" I think about the woman I was 2 years ago, invisible even to herself, existing only in relation to others' needs and expectations. I think about the woman I am become, an artist, teacher, traveler, autonomous being. No, I admit, but I'm grateful every day that it did. Later, after my friends leave, I stand in my studio, looking at the paintings that will form my solo exhibition. Each one represents a step in my journey, from invisibility to selfhood. Each brush stroke, a small act of courage. My phone buzzes with a text from Andrew. "Heard about the museum exhibition. So proud of you, Mom. You deserve this." I smile at the simple message and what it represents. A son seeing his mother as a complete person, for perhaps the first time. As midnight approaches, I wrap myself in a shawl and step onto my back porch, watching snow transform my garden into a blank canvas. Tomorrow, I'll begin a new painting. Next month, I'll teach another class. In spring, I'll stand in a museum beside my work. The future stretches before me, unscripted and entirely mine. "Thank you," I whisper to the universe, grateful for the crisis that, though painful, freed me to live authentically for the first time in decades. The snow continues to fall, covering everything in pristine white, a perfect metaphor for the second chance I never expected and now cherish beyond measure. Eleanor Thompson, once defined by everyone but herself, finally exists on her own terms, and that, I now understand, is the greatest revenge of all. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.